Almost everything you were taught about where Columbus was born is wrong. Not the ships, not the date, where the man actually came from. He hid it so well that historians argued over it for 500 years, and 25 cities across 6 countries claimed him as their own son. The strange part? He could have ended the argument in one sentence. He chose not to. He took the truth to his grave on purpose, and it stayed there, locked inside his own bones, until 2024, when a lab in Spain finally read what he never wanted read. Let me take you back to the version you were taught in school. The official story begins in Genoa, around 1451. A boy named Cristoforo Colombo, son of a wool weaver, growing up in the salt air of one of the busiest ports in the Mediterranean. He goes to sea young. He sails for Portugal. He builds a dream he can't let go of, a path west across the open Atlantic to the riches of the Indies. Every king he asks turns him down, until 1492, when the Spanish crown finally says yes. 3 ships, the Santa Maria, the Pinta, the Niña, 10 weeks of empty horizon, and then land on the 12th of October, a moment that split human history into before and after. It is a clean story, a famous story. There is just one problem, because here's the part that historians kept tripping over. For a man supposedly born and raised in Genoa, Columbus barely wrote a word of Italian, not in his letters to his own brothers, not in the notes in the side of his books, not even in his private notes, the ones no king would ever read. He wrote in Spanish, mixed with Portuguese spellings, and a little Latin. When he did reach for his so-called home language, it came out wrong, like a language he had learned, not one he had grown up speaking. Think about that for a second. The most famous man from Genoa in the world, and he wrote like he was hiding where he came from. And that is exactly what the city sensed. Spanish, Portuguese, Greek, Basque, even Polish. Town after town built a case for why he was secretly theirs, because the official story had a hole in the middle of it, and everyone could feel it. And then there was the signature. Columbus signed his name with a strange triangle stack of letters, a pyramid of capitals that nobody has ever fully cracked. He left clear orders that his children and their children must copy it exactly, forever, and never explain what it meant. Some scholars saw Latin prayers in it. Others saw something else entirely. A few noticed it looked like marks used by Sephardic Jews to hide their faith in writing. A secret, signed in plain sight on every paper the man ever touched. And that is the detail that should stop you cold. Think about what it takes to do that. To build a code into your own name, swear your children to it, and carry it to the grave without ever once explaining it. People don't guard a secret that hard unless the truth behind it is dangerous. He wasn't just private, he was protecting something. This is the part that always got under my skin. Everywhere you looked, the trail went cold on purpose. The careful writing, the buried past, the coded name, a man who crossed an ocean to make himself live forever, and then spent his whole life making sure you'd never know who he really was. So, how do you solve a mystery when the only witness spent his life lying about it? You stop reading what he wrote, and you start reading what he left behind. Which brings us to the strangest part of this whole story. The bones themselves would not stay still. He passed away in 1506 in a rented room in Valladolid, Spain, bitter and half forgotten, sure right to the end that he had reached the edge of Asia. They buried him there, but that was only the first stop. A few years later, his remains made their way to a church in Seville. Then, to honor a wish he'd made in life, his body was shipped across the Atlantic to the island of Hispaniola, to the cathedral in Santo Domingo, in what is now the Dominican Republic. He'd wanted to rest in the New World. He believed he had opened. He didn't rest for long. When Spain lost hold of the island, crews dug them up again and carried them to Havana, Cuba. And when Spain lost Cuba too, at the end of the 1800s, the bones came back across the ocean one last time, to Seville Cathedral, where today they sit inside a huge bronze tomb, held high on the shoulders of 4 stone kings. A body that crossed the Atlantic 3 times after he was gone. A man who couldn't find peace in life, and it seems couldn't find it after, either. But there's a catch, and it's a big one. In 1877, workers in the cathedral at Santo Domingo found a lead box buried in the floor. Carved on it, in Old Spanish, was a claim that these were the bones of the famous and great man Christopher Columbus. Stop and picture that. Spain had spent 300 years moving these remains across 2 oceans, certain they had the real Columbus the entire time. And now, in a cathedral floor a world away, someone had found a second body with his name on it. One of the 2 had to be wrong. Both refused to be. The Dominican Republic has insisted, ever since, that they have the real Columbus. That Spain shipped the wrong bones home by mistake and never even knew. They built a giant monument to hold their box. They were not letting go. So now there were 2 tombs, 2 cities, 2 sets of remains, and both swore, with full certainty, that they held the body of the man who changed the world. You'd think someone would have settled it long ago. For more than 100 years, nobody could. They had names carved in stone and faith on both sides, and not one shred of proof that would hold up. And this is exactly where the story stops being about history and starts being about science. Enter José Antonio Lorente. Lorente is a forensic medicine professor at the University of Granada in southern Spain. He had spent a career using DNA to name the missing, the lost, the unknown, people lost in disasters, remains recovered from forgotten graves, people that history had tried to erase. And in 2003, he set himself the hardest naming case anyone had ever tried. He was going to put a name to the most famous bones on Earth. So he went to Seville Cathedral, and with the church's okay, he had them open the tomb. Picture the scene: the high stone ceiling, the 4 bronze kings frozen mid-step, and a team in white gloves lifting out a small, fragile set of bone pieces. That was all that was left inside. Not a skeleton, a handful of pieces, scattered and broken by 500 years and 3 ocean crossings. Lorente had a plan, and on paper, it was simple. Columbus did not make that final journey alone. His younger brother, Diego, was also buried in Seville, and so was his son, Hernando, the boy who grew up to write his father's life story. If Lorente could compare DNA from all 3, the family signs should line up. The bones would prove they were related, and those ties would lock the name into place. Mitochondrial DNA passes down the mother's line, mother to child, almost unchanged for many lifetimes. The Y chromosome passes father to son the same way. Get clean reads from both, and you can trace a family back hundreds of years. That was the idea in 2003. There was just one problem. The tools to actually do it didn't exist yet. The samples were too old, too broken down, too dirtied by everyone who had handled those bones across 500 years. Lorente ran his first tests, and the results were partial, messy, not good enough to stake history on. So he made a choice that most scientists would never have the patience for. He sealed the samples, and he waited. Sit with how strange that decision is. He had the most famous bones on Earth in his hands, the world watching, the question wide open. He could have forced an answer with the tools he had and made headlines that week. Instead, he locked the evidence away and bet that science he couldn't yet imagine would one day come and finish the job. He waited for the technology to catch up to the question. If you're finding this as amazing as I am, take 1 second and subscribe. We dig into history's oldest mysteries and the tools finally cracking them open every single week. It really helps the channel keep doing this. Now, while those sealed samples sat in a lab in Granada, the whole field of DNA science was being rebuilt around them. The same wave that gave us at-home ancestry kits and pulled readable DNA out of Neanderthal teeth was changing what was possible. Machines that could read an entire set of DNA in a day. Methods that could rebuild a person from pieces so tiny they were once thought worthless. The kind of broken down sample that made Lorente seal the box in 2003 was now, 20 years later, exactly the kind of sample these tools were built to read. By 2024, after 22 years, the wait was finally over. Lorente built a team across many universities. They went back to the bones, the brother, the son, and this time, the machines in the Granada lab could see what the machines in 2003 never could. The first question was the one everyone had argued about for 100 years. Whose bones were actually in that Seville tomb? The answer came back clear. The remains in Seville and the remains of his brother Diego shared the DNA markers you would only expect from close family relatives. The bones in Seville Cathedral were, beyond real doubt, Christopher Columbus. So, Spain had been right. They really did bring him home. But that, it turned out, was the small reveal. Because the same DNA that proved who he was carried something else inside it. Something nobody had been able to read for 500 years. The answer to the question the man had spent his whole life burying, where he truly came from. And here is where you have to slow down, because this is the moment 22 years had been building toward. 5 centuries of guessing, 25 cities fighting over him, a coded name, a borrowed language, a secret carried to the grave. All of it came down to what the markers in those broken bones would say next. When the team studied the DNA markers, the Y chromosome from the father's line, the mitochondrial DNA from the mother's, the clue pointed away from the Italian story entirely. It pointed to the western edge of the Mediterranean, and it carried traits that matched a Sephardic Jewish origin. The group of Jews who had lived in Spain for hundreds of years, under names and lives they were often forced to hide. Lorente, standing in front of the cameras when the findings came out, was careful. He's a scientist, not a showman. But the answer his team kept coming back to was this. Columbus was very likely a Sephardic Jew from the western edge of the Mediterranean, maybe from somewhere near Valencia on the Spanish coast. Not a weaver's son from Genoa, a man from a hunted people who built a new name on top of the one he was born with. And the moment you understand that, every strange piece of this story stops being strange. It clicks into place because of what was happening in Spain in the exact year Columbus sailed, 1492 is famous for one thing: the voyage. But for the Jews of Spain, 1492 meant something else entirely. That same year, the Spanish king and queen, Ferdinand and Isabella, signed the Alhambra Decree. The decree ordered every Jew in the kingdom to become Christian or leave the country forever. Those who stayed and changed faith, often only on the outside, lived under the shadow of the Inquisition, watched, doubted, and always at risk of being turned in. And the people watching weren't strangers. A neighbor could report you. A rival could whisper a name to the wrong official. Whole families learned to live with two faces, one for the street and one for behind a locked door, knowing a single slip could cost them everything they had. That was the world a man with Sephardic roots would have grown up inside. So picture a man with that secret in that world. A man trying to win the trust of the most Catholic court in Europe. A man who needs Ferdinand and Isabella to hand him ships, money, and the power of the crown. You don't tell them where you're really from. You bury it. You write in a borrowed language. You build a signature out of code. You let the world believe you're a humble sailor from Genoa because the truth could cost you everything. The ships, the voyage, your life. He wasn't being mysterious just for the sake of it. He was a man hiding in plain sight, in the most dangerous time you could imagine, to be exactly who he was. For 500 years, we read that secrecy as strangeness, as ego, as the quirks of a hard-to-know genius. We had it backwards the whole time. It was survival. Now, I want to be straight with you, because this story isn't finished. The findings point to the Western Mediterranean and to Sephardic roots. They narrow 500 years of wild guessing down to a single people and a single region. But the exact town, the exact house, the family name he was born under, those are still out there. The DNA closed the biggest door in the mystery. It left a smaller one open, and maybe that fits. A man who spent his life making sure you'd never fully know him doesn't give up all his secrets at once, even now. Even with his own DNA laid bare under a microscope in Granada. So the real question isn't whether the bones in Seville belong to Columbus. We know that now. The real question is how many other faces in our history books are wearing borrowed names? How many people we think we know completely spent their whole lives making sure we never would? Christopher Columbus crossed an ocean to be remembered forever. He just made very sure we'd remember the wrong man. It took 22 years, a sealed box of bones, and tools he could never have dreamed of to finally see the person underneath. If you want to see how today's DNA cracked another name history got wrong for hundreds of years, that video is on the screen right now. Go meet the next ghost we pulled the mask off of.